Welcome everyone. Today we are having a conversation with Jamie McLeod-Skinner. She is running for the newly formed District 5 House of Representatives. Jamie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to have this conversation.
So Jamie, let's start by having you introduce yourself and say why you decided to run.
Sure. I am a small business owner. I'm working most recently in emergency preparedness and recovery. And that's a key issue we're facing with wildfires and drought, et cetera. Also helping on some affordable housing issues. I'm an attorney focused on natural resource law and water law. Last year, Oregon got a new congressional district, and the lines were redrawn for the old districts. The newly drawn 5th now extends from southern Portland down to Sun River, actually. The reason I'm running is because we just are facing tremendous challenges right now, and need someone who understands issues on the ground, has the relationships in place, can bridge the urban-rural divide, and just show up and get things done.
Great. And we'll get into the specifics, but why are you the best candidate among the two Democrats that are running for this?
Sure. So I live in Central Oregon, and it's just me and Kurt Schrader, and folks will have seen a lot of his ads on TV and a lot of his flyers. The question is always who paid for them, and takes a tremendous amount of corporate PAC money, and that's really what's paid for all the flyers and all the information that's going in front of folks. I am running to represent Oregonians, and the challenges that we're facing with regard for working families recovering, working people recovering from the COVID economy, also are the natural disasters we're facing and the challenges we're facing around the climate crisis, and also protecting our democracy. That integrity in government are all things that folks, Oregonians, are talking about. And those are areas where I've got on the ground experience, and I'm really committed to taking action on. With all due respect to my counterpart in this race, he's not the guy that folks originally sent to Congress, and he's been actually carving out and gutting programs that were meant as solutions for Oregonians and for Americans in general. So the Build Back Better agenda, he actually was one of the handful of Democrats who carved that out, split that into different bills, and then also carved out some really key provisions like sustainable energy programs, carved those out of the infrastructure bill. Oregonians were literally fleeing our homes. Last year, I worked in wildfire recovery in Talent, which had lost a third of its homes to wildfire, to homes and businesses. And so those kind of issues, understanding those issues and being able to address those issues is just critically important in our representative.
So, Jamie, constituents east of the mountains have gotten to know you during your run against Greg Walden, but this is a newly drawn district, and there are going to be a lot of people who don't know you yet east of the mountains. Meanwhile, your opponent in the Democratic primary has the opposite concern. He's better known in the Portland metro area versus people on this side. What's your approach, and how do you see yourself introducing yourself, to kind of a hodgepodge of new constituents?
Well, as you mentioned, there's two sides to that. 53% of the voters in the newly drawn 5th congressional district, which now extends up into southern Portland and then down to, as I mentioned, Sun River. 53% of the voters are new. So Kurt Schrader has never been on the ballot for over half of the folks in this district. Deschutes County, based on, and a bit of Jefferson County, but Central Oregon is almost going to be up to about a third of the likely voters. It's just over a quarter in terms of the numbers, but there's typically a higher turnout in Central Oregon. And so we've got those two sides of things. I've been spending a lot of time over on the western side of the Cascades. I just attended actually this morning an event in North Clackamas County on the state of the county address, and met with and chatted with a lot of the county commissioners and a lot of the folks who are working on issues over in the southern metro area. The approach we've taken, and actually we've been building relationships across the state for the last several years, worked very closely with in leadership development with BIPOC communities, for folks who are really rural Democrats, those who are working to bridge the urban-rural divide. and just with a lot of the organizational work I've been doing. I serve as an at-large member of the OEB board, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, which is a statewide board working on investments in natural resource in our watersheds. So I've got that connection I've been making with folks. And then just now in terms of showing up for this race and chatting with folks, the big challenges are the same across the board. You know, bottom line, we all want to put a roof over our head and food on our table. We want healthcare for our families. We want childcare so people can get back to work. You know, mental and physical health care are big things. And so the relationships and the conversations we've been having, you know, people are talking about the same things on throughout the district in urban and rural areas. And we've actually I've been fortunate to have tremendous support and getting endorsements from a lot of folks at the local level, at the state level, in the metro area and throughout the district, which has been really helpful. So it's been also folks introducing me to folks who know and trust them. And then a really big thing, especially for Democrats here in the primary, is that 4 of the counties, which represent 92% of the voters, 4 of the county Democratic parties have actually voted to endorse me in this primary, including Kurt Schrader's home of Clackamas County, because the double-edged sword for him is even those who know him, they know his record as well. And so his vote against lowering prescription drug prices, the stance he's taken on you know, voting against Build Back Better before it was split, voting against emergency housing relief and protections during the height of COVID, voting against the American Recovery Act, those $2,000 stimulus checks, voting against the Dreamer Act back in 2010, his vote against preventing active duty service members and veterans from being harassed by bill collectors, voting against raising the minimum wage, voting against the PRO Act, protecting the right to organize, which is a huge issue for working families and unions. His votes against those measures and his source of funding is really causes a lot of heartburn from folks who do know him. So the fact he's taken $650,000 in big pharma money, and he's actually a big pharma heir. That's what he comes from. That's why he gets to send out all those flyers. The money he takes, the $300,000 from oil and gas corporations. And he's even, until just recently, because we called him out on it, he's even one of the 3 Democrats who the Koch brothers, now Koch Industries, had maxed out on. And that's very much a pay-to-play organization. So we've been building relationships, and the networks of folks who are well known throughout the district. They've been helping to introduce me to folks, and then we've got a standard ground game and outreach and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should point out that we did invite Representative Schrader to this interview and reached out several times and did not receive a response. So we are having this interview with Jamie. One-on-one, 2-on-1, I suppose.
Well, and I
just
mentioned
so folks know that what's going on here.
Yeah.
What other challenges have you? What's that?
Sorry, if I can just say to that point, I actually even saw him. I saw him up in the metro area right now, and actually just saw him earlier today. And so, you know, he's doing fine. So it was a decision of his not to do it. And he also actually backed out of the League of Women Voters and Central Oregon City Club debate next week. We were supposed to go head to head, and we had a head-to-head conversation last Monday, and I think he got kind of nervous about that. So he's kind of not made himself available. He also didn't show up for our Portland paper interview as well.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the interview that didn't go so well? I'm obviously curious about that.
Yeah, well, it was with the Oregonian, and they will make their decision this weekend. But you know, folks ought to know how people voted. And so I have, when we were both asked about things, I raised the concerns and questions I had about how he's voted on issues, how I would vote differently. He got very defensive. He actually spoke over the moderator and kept challenging. One of the things that he became very animated about was stock trading. So there's a bipartisan bill in Congress to prevent members of Congress from trading stocks. It's pretty straightforward, because those who are making the rules should also not be able to kind of bet on the teams that they're making the rules for. And he is a prolific stock trader. He traded about 1.1 million in stock trades last year. And then also just after the infrastructure bill went forward. And like I said, he bifurcated, split up Build Back Better. On the infrastructure bill, he gutted out a lot of environmental programs necessary for sustainable and renewable energy. And then literally days after that bill went forward, he did vote for the final bill. But days after it went forward, he then started trading stock in construction companies. So again, that sense of making the rules and then also and holding the purse strings and then investing in companies. We started to talk about that, and he got very defensive about that, and again was interrupting the moderator, not even myself. The other thing, the questions were coming up about all the flyers he's sending out and the accuracy of statements he's making on those. He also has some big pharma companies sending out flyers on his behalf, so independent expenditures, claiming that he's lowering prescription drug prices when he was the deciding vote against Medicare being able to negotiate prescription drug prices in committee. So he's trying to reframe that as well.
I should mention, Jamie, that it's getting a little personal because I'm moderating the debate for the League of Women Voters and City Club between you and Kurt, and then I got word he wasn't doing that one either. I was like, dang, twice in a row, it's a little much. I wanted to touch on what you were talking about, those TV ads and lowering the drug prices, but one of the things is the reality also is that bill regarding the prescription drug prices isn't passed in the Senate, and when the election comes, there's a chance always that the House or the Senate or even both could flip Republican. If it can't pass with a slim majority in the Senate, where are we with that right now?
Well, if you talk to voters, the vast majority across the political spectrum are committed to moving that forward. I mean, like over 90% of folks, in the district want to see their prescription drug prices lowered. And so that is just a matter of getting out, rolling up your sleeves, getting out and talking to voters and building up that pressure amongst not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. And so there's a real opportunity to work in partnership with political potential allies across the aisle to make that happen. It's a very popular issue amongst voters. And so it's important first to kind of put your best foot forward. And we could have done that with a complete Build Back Better package that both looked at physical and social infrastructure, and then specifically with healthcare and essentially lowering prescription drug prices. There was an opportunity to move that forward in committee. He was a deciding vote against it. He voted with Republicans. And so he's come back later and said, well, he was trying to create, trying to remember how he frames it. He's saying something about he was trying to create something that could pass. But if you're the deciding vote to kill it in committee, it's not a matter of you helping, it's a matter of you undermining it. Part of this was a timing issue, and even on Build Back Better, had that gone through the House right away, there was a lot of energy and momentum for it to pass, to go through the Senate, because there was individuals like Kurt Schrader who was dragging it out and attacking Build Back Better on the early stages. That really hurt the opportunity for that whole package to go through.
Mm-hmm. I want to shift gears a second. Let's talk about climate change, which I know is one of your priorities. I want to know a little more about your approach. And then, just hearing even this month, we've heard from the folks at the UN that, we're in trouble. It doesn't seem like voluntary measures or even a youth movement are making much of a difference. People are still choosing to, they're in favor of these things, but they won't change their behaviors. So what's your approach there? Is it a heavy-handed approach? Do we mandate things? What do we do here?
Well, it's a combination of carrot and stick, but there's that overall trajectory that we're on, and there's that piece of it. There's also the emergency preparedness. And so part of the work I'm doing for the state right now is in emergency preparedness, because I spent half of last year actually helping a city who'd lost a third of its homes and businesses to wildfire get back on its feet. We're going to see these crises again. We know right now that we're facing drought. And so whether it's urban areas or even rural areas and farms, so there's also how we prepare ourselves and also how we recover when disasters hit. So it's really those three legs of the stool. But to the first part, right now our taxpayer dollars are being invested in dirty fuels that are causing the problem. And so we can be shifting those investments into a sustainable renewable energy grid. Now we have to, and this is for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's for the climate crisis and addressing the climate crisis. It's also for a national security issue. And we're seeing what's happening right now with Putin's the invasion of Ukraine and a lot of the leverage that Putin has because of energy. Russia having access to a lot of fossil fuel energy and the dependence in Europe on that. So we need to be making those for multiple different reasons. But the investment piece is we've got to build up a sustainable energy grid, because even if there was absolute commitment to switch over tomorrow, you can't just flick a switch. There's a whole grid that needs to be developed. So we need to be investing in new technologies. We need to be investing in sustainable energy. We need to be storage, so battery systems, and then also the grid itself, so that we can make that transition and have it be pretty aggressive. There's also things like, helping, that's the energy piece, but also regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of other things we can be investing in. So some of those things are carrot approaches, so things like regenerative ag. But in terms of the grid itself, I mean, part of that is just making the financial investment in it, and that will create a draw into that area. And then also, at a certain point, then we put the mandates. So you first got to make sure there's the opportunity to do it, and then you stick the mandates in. But you really start with carrots. And so, we know we're not going to get there with just the, for people opting in. We really have to both establish those stick and carrots now at this point.
We won't actually know the color or the full range of perspectives for this new district till after the election, but you're running in a district that clearly has a wide range of opinions on all of these issues. And I mean, I know you're very familiar with Central Oregon and how divided it can be here on gun rights, founders' intent, certainly climate change, as we were talking about. How do you see the stuff on climate change and a lot of the some of the things that might not be carrots, might be more stick? How do you see that sitting over here with Central Oregon constituents?
Sure. Well, we all want clean air and clean water for our kids, and we don't want our houses to burn down. And one of the things that we know is when a wildfire is tearing through a place, it doesn't stop to check party affiliation. So in often cases, this is a matter of how we talk about it. In more urban areas, we'll talk about climate change and climate crisis. In rural areas, we talk about wildfire and drought and flooding. So it's partially the language we use. It's also partially the focus we bring, and then bringing people to the table is really critically important. This is a really purple district, which I think is great. Back in 2018, when I ran in the old 2nd Congressional District, which used to be everything east of the Cascades in Southern Oregon, now Central Oregon, a chunk of Central Oregon is now in the newly drawn 5th. But back in 2018, we had the largest voter swing of any congressional race in the entire country because of the showing up, the listening, the talking solutions, instead of using buzzwords. And that really resonates, I think, across the political spectrum. I actually won Deschutes County back in 2018 against a 20-year Republican, and won, precincts that Trump won because it was a matter of talking solutions and connecting with folks. And had a lot of Republicans who said that they, as the first Democrat they'd ever voted for, but they just really appreciated the respect and the approach and the focus on how do we work together to solve these common challenges. I mean, regardless of party affiliation, I think I mentioned this before, we all just want to put a roof over our head and food on our table. We want healthcare for our families when they're sick without going bankrupt. We want to be able to have educational opportunities for our kids, and we don't want our homes to burn down. And when you really start there, there's a tremendous amount of common ground.
Another one of your priorities is childcare. Obviously, we know this is a massive problem for Bend and Central Oregon and all of the state, really. How does Congress play a role in that?
Yeah, it's and let me just say, I'm getting a little bit of buzz on here, so I don't know if other folks are hearing as well. So there's a little bit of background buzz. So that was actually part of the original Build Back Better plan. So the original Build Back Better included both a physical infrastructure and a social infrastructure. And we have seen our social infrastructure degraded over the past few decades. And again, when I'm running against someone who comes from a place of tremendous privilege and has never had to make those tough decisions around the kitchen table. I mean, when I was young, I was raised by a single mom. She had 2 kids, and if the cost of rent went up, that meant that the money we had to pay for food went down. I mean, that was the reality that we faced. And a lot of families are facing that kind of reality now. The cost of housing, the cost of healthcare, the gas at the pump, and as you said, childcare. So we should be making, and the federal government can do this. There was a conscious decision by folks like Kurt Schrader not to do it, but the federal government should be investing in this type of social infrastructure to help people get back on their feet. We're coming out of a 100-year pandemic, once in a 100-year pandemic. And so it's almost like after World War II, Europe needed the Marshall Plan. Or working families, working people need that kind of Marshall Plan to help people get back on their feet. I've met with folks in the district who said they want to go back to work, but they either can't get access to childcare or it's so expensive that it doesn't make sense for them to go back, because they're going to be paying everything out in just the cost of childcare alone. There's also, with things like construction projects going on, there are folks who don't have access to that work because construction jobs start early. And so we don't also have childcare that's tailor-made to the needs of working folks at this time. So making a federal investment in that, even if we do it for a window of time to allow our economy to rebound, allow people to get back on their feet, it's really important. And so with childcare, again, education, we should be making more investments in pre-K. There's opportunities to bring down classroom sizes and make more investments in K through 12, but also like CTE programs, career technical education programs in high school, and then getting people into the career pipeline. So, debt-free community college, and also debt-free if you sign up for things like, if you want to become a teacher, an educator, or nurses, or healthcare professions, the pipeline of professionals has really been starved, and we've got all sorts of challenges that are being faced right now. So we need to be investing in those things, because we are facing many current and upcoming pending crises by folks just not being able to everything from paying for their own housing to also invest in themselves and get the education they need to keep our economy thriving.
Jamie, student loan forgiveness is a topic that circles around and comes up periodically around election time. Is that a viable option? Is that something that people should feel one day, maybe something that could arrive?
I think so. I think there's two things. One is there is a certain level of debt forgiveness up front, but what's more important is to look down the future of how we want to handle this and how we want to set the stage to encourage people to invest in themselves. So, for example, one of the programs that actually they're using out in Eastern Oregon for educators is to start with some training in high school, and then investments. Now they're just making a partial investment. I think we can make a full investment in this. To get folks who want to go to become teachers, to help them through get their 4-year degree, and then help in that first year of being in the classroom. Now, if you sign up for if say in your high school, you sign up for this program, you want to become a teacher, you could go through a program like this, get it paid for. And then if you, when you're fully trained, if you go back and then work for a few years in that field, then you essentially pay off your debt. It's kind of like a GI Bill almost, but we need a GI Bill for professionals and for civilians as well. Those are the ways to make investments, because I'm a stepmom of 4, and our kids are nervous about going into debt because they're afraid they're not going to pay it off. I mean, the programs that were in place when I was their age are no longer in place. That's that undercutting of our social infrastructure. So we need to build those systems back up so that younger folks, and even folks going back into professions, are able to invest in themselves and to get back on their feet. This is the same also with our work with unions and investing and supporting the trades, because we need folks with this expertise in these professions. And so how do we make it possible for people to lean into this? Because we're going to need it for our communities and our day-to-day living going forward. And post-COVID, we've had all sorts of nurses and health professionals just quit because they're exhausted. This year, in talking to teachers and educators, it's heartbreaking because people are quitting mid-year. I've talked to 30-year professionals, and my mom was a retired teacher. They've never seen this before, where people quit mid-year because they're just so exhausted, and it's so stressful right now. And so that kind of understanding on the ground and how we need to make investments in our people and in our communities right now, so that we can set the stage to create stability post-COVID, get our economy going again, get people back on their feet. So those, whether it's childcare, as you mentioned, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's physical and mental health care, whether it's investing in education, K through college, or early pre-K through college, Those are all simply investments. When I was first elected to office in 2004, I served on a city council for 8 years. And I've said since then, I don't believe in spending public money. I believe in investing it. There's a need right now for the investment of public funds in people. And we're just not doing it. And that's something I'm committed to doing.
Does that make you, I mean, provided you advance to the general election, I assume that there will be more conversations about reining in a budget, about reining in inflation. When you're talking about investing, what's going to be your conversation around debt concerns at the federal level?
Well, if you're investing, and it's a relatively small amount, if you're investing in someone being able to go out and get a job and get back on their own feet, that's an investment in them. And this is a concern that I've heard really across the political spectrum, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. It goes back to that, roof over your head and food on your table philosophy. And even things like healthcare, mental health care, there's barriers people are facing right now to re-engage in the economy. With inflation, part of that is supply chain. Part of that, there's a couple different areas where we've made poor mistakes, and we've made poor decisions in the past and not done the investments in our economy and helping people re-engage in the economy. I mean, COVID has really thrown us for a loop. Some people have done really well during it, but a lot of folks, especially those frontline folks, have really, really struggled. People are exhausted. And so helping people through this time and then getting kind of reinvigorating, getting the engine of our economy going again is going to benefit everyone. I just came from the state of the county, the annual state of the county conversation in North Clackamas County. And a lot of those commissioners are more conservative. They were talking about the need for affordable housing. They were talking about the need for mental health care to support people, to get into housing, people who are houseless, but also on public safety concerns, on other issues as well. This is not an R versus D conversation. These are common challenges that everyone's facing, and the ideas that we're talking about are enabling us to work together to move forward. And so it's not, I think that's why I've been so shocked that some Democrats, such as Kurt Schrader, the guys running against me, have not invested and not stepped forward on these solutions. These are solutions to get our economy going again. And that's something that's of a lot of concern and a lot of interest to Republicans and independents as well.
I mean, I guess it makes me wonder, is the government going to run out of money, and what happens?
So it's, we have a limited, sorry, and I don't know if you guys are hearing because the
we're not hearing it. I don't know. I'm hoping it's not coming on the
maybe on my end. That's okay. So here's the thing: is we have a fixed amount of money. It's not just simply spending more money. What I'm talking about when we talk about the climate crisis, that's also a challenge to our national security. When we're talking about things like the state of our education, if someone else had to impose or wished on the crisis that our educators are facing right now, we would consider it an act of war. I mean, this is a really major issue. So our country overspends very aggressively on national security and on our defense budget. Now, I actually have lived and worked in war zones. I've worked in post-war zone recovery. I am very serious and committed to making sure that our national security is intact, that we have the military we need, and we're fully funding our military. So there's no question there. But we also are spending a lot more than comparable other countries, and we're putting a lot more money. So some of those funds should be redirected because these are national security issues for us. And then things like we were talking about the sustainable energy grid earlier and addressing the climate crisis or climate change or drought or all these things that we're facing. Those funds can help to protect us in terms of national security, in terms of the resources that could otherwise be spent and have us be vulnerable on the international level. So they're funds that we would be reallocating, I'm not talking about printing more money. I'm talking about reallocating resources that would be used to actually help us get back, people get back on their feet, get our economy back on our feet, and to be able to be investing in people again.
Jamie, could you speak a little bit to your work with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board? What do they do, and how does that help inform your knowledge of water issues, which are certainly a major concern in this year coming up?
Yeah, and this is a huge thing for me personally. I also my background, I worked as an environmental planner for a regional water agency. My law degree is in natural resource law with a focus on water law and Indian law. The OWEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, takes public funds and invests them, as I was mentioning, into helping communities protect their watersheds and essentially have more sustainable, helping with fishery and fish resources, fish passage, but also sustainable environments for fish and natural wildlife and habitat. The other thing that most recently OWEB's been tasked with is also helping out in drought recovery. So the focus areas in the funds were allocated in the last legislative session for Jefferson County and also for Klamath County to help with get folks through the drought, help farmers get through the drought. There's also been work and investment on wildfire recovery and wildfire assistance in the past, and actually even COVID for farm workers is something that OWEB's done in the past, because the agency is set up to help distribute funds and to help folks on the ground level conduct projects that are helpful for the community. So I've been on, the governor appointed me to OWEB a couple of years ago, was approved by the Oregon Senate, and that's work that we're doing that is statewide, that helps to both bridge those divides, work collectively across both the political spectrum, but also the urban-rural divide to create solutions for Oregonians.
Well, we are getting close. I guess I have one more question in regards to that. Why are you more qualified to deal with water issues than your opponent? I mean, you sort of touched on that, but let's belabor the point.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple things. One, having on the ground experience is really key, and that's on water issues. That's also on affordable housing. That's also on wildfire preparedness and recovery. There's also an understanding of both the need to allocate those resources and a commitment to advocate for them at the federal level, but also as those laws are drawn up, to have an understanding of how you actually do that work at the local level so that you're targeting those resources. Because we also sometimes see funds that are allocated but do not actually have the impact on the ground. So, you know, taking aside affordable housing, for example, there's a lot of really creative things that the Bend City Council is working on right now. And those earmarks through community block grant funds or those kind of resources, making sure that they have the federal resources to do that work. But natural resource issues, also the relationships are really key. You asked before about relationships throughout the district, but really the relationships I have throughout the state with tribal communities, in urban and rural areas, and across the political spectrum. It's about just, you know, showing up, understanding the issues, and working together to get things done. That's government at its best. We don't always see that, and you know, there is a bit of a shouting match in Congress, but we also need folks who understand those issues, and then, frankly, as a rural Democrat, can help Democrats understand how to better communicate across the divide, and show up and provide solutions for rural folks. One of the things I found in 2018, when I drove the equivalent of 15 times across the country throughout the old 2nd Congressional District, was really that so many people are just feeling unheard and unseen and overlooked. And that's why it's so important to show up and listen with respect, and also to be able to communicate across the divide, and then to create solutions, work together on solutions. That's something that I've always been about. And then also to really stick with those issues at the federal level and not water them down. You know, people right now, I'm running against someone who does a lot of watering down and a lot of gutting of programs, but you know, some of the things that rural conservative Republicans are most desperate and most in need of right now are those same programs that, you know, Democrats are trying to fight for. So it's showing up and get things done for all Oregonians. And I guess I just, you know, I love public service. I serve on a rural education service district board now. I've served on a city council. I serve on OWEB. I'd be honored to serve Oregonians in Congress in the newly drawn 5th.
That kind of comes to the end of our questions. Are there anything else, any other topics we did not bring up that you wanted to touch on?
Well, one is protecting our democracy, and that's everything from things like voting rights to also, also right to organize and all those components. But it also comes down to those relationship pieces and those ability to bridge the divide. I've heard concerns from folks, again, across the political divide, across the political spectrum, about this sense that we're in silos and there's the shouting matches that are going on. One of the reasons why I was so successful, relatively successful in 2018, but also, one of the things that I just really enjoy doing and have been able to do well is connect people, get people out of their silos and connect people across the divide. There's really, the cliche is there's so much more that unites us and divides us, but it's really true when you get out there and meet with folks, and people have to be drawn into having a seat at the table and working together on solutions so that we are focused on taking care of our communities. I mean, that's really politics at its best. And that's important for not just winning elections, but that's really important for good governance. We are in a place of people are in a time of crisis. People are in a sense of hopelessness and fear. We need to start leaning into each other and trust each other a bit more and building up these relationships so that we can get the job done and take care of each other and get ourselves on a positive trajectory. While there's so much crisis that we can talk about right now, I feel very hopeful. And I really think it's a time for hope, because if we can start doing some of that work together, we'll be okay.
Jamie, thanks for taking the time. I know this district might not be as big as it was before, but it's still a very big district. And I know there's a lot of demands for your time. So we really appreciate you stopping in here.
So thanks so much for the opportunity, and thanks for what all you do to help keep people informed and keep information out in Central Oregon.
Hey, thank you, Jamie. Good luck.
Take care. Thanks.
Good day.
See ya.